The windows did not reflect the world. They consumed it. At dusk they misted over with no breath near them, as though something inside exhaled. Villagers swore the panes blinked when no one looked directly. The house sat on the far bend of the road, where even crows refused to perch on the gables. It had been empty for 30 years, though no deed had ever changed hands and no man claimed to own it. The timbers warped inward like ribs caving around a chest, and the glass, the glass, never clouded with dust, never shattered with the storms. It gleamed with the wet sheen of an eye too long open, waiting. Children dared each other to run across the porch at twilight, and though many swore they saw nothing, a few came back pale as linen, mumbling of movement behind the panes. "It isn't your face that looks back," they whispered, clutching at their throats as though something cold had trailed its fingers there. The blacksmith's wife, Eleanor, once lingered too long near the front window, peering in with that bold foolishness of the curious. She saw a parlour stripped bare, no chairs, no hearth embers, only warped floorboards glistening damp as if freshly washed. But the glass between her and that room clouded for just a moment, and when it cleared, her reflection was gone. In its place stood a woman she did not know, wearing her face but older, hollow-cheeked, eyes dim with something like grief. Eleanor shrieked and staggered back into the mud, swearing that her own image stayed inside long after she fled. The villagers spoke of these things in murmurs over ale, careful to keep their backs to the door, for sound carried strangely near. That house. Even in the market, if a bottle clinked too sharply or a bell tolled at the wrong pitch, they would glance toward the hill where the windows glimmered and grow silent, as though afraid the glass itself might be listening. "It breathes," said the miller, voice low as ground flour. "It waits for someone to open it." "Then let it starve," grumbled the priest. "It has no soul." But when pressed, well, why not bless it, why not burn it? The priest would only shake his head, mutter a prayer too old for anyone to recognize, and change the subject. On. The eve of St. Bridget's, when fires burned high to drive out winter, a boy named Daniel vanished near that bend in the road. His mother found his lantern lying unlit in the grass, but no footprints led away. In the weeks after, the panes grew darker, almost tinted from within, and travellers swore they saw a small pale hand press briefly against the upstairs glass before sinking out of sight. One fog-thick night, old Abram Kettler decided to prove the village cowards wrong. He'd drunk too much, they said later, but his voice was steady as he walked up the path carrying only a hammer. "If it watches," he laughed, "I'll smash its eyes out." The neighbours watched from a distance, breath shallow, as his figure mounted the porch. No one saw him break the glass. No shatter rang through the night. There was only silence. And then, very faintly, the sound of knocking, from inside, measured, polite, as though something waited for Abram to answer. The next morning the house stood whole, every pane untouched, but Abram's hammer lay neatly on the sill. No one ever saw him again. Whispers crawled like ivy through the village. They said the glass didn't show reflections, it kept them, that every face that lingered too long would be etched behind those panes, staring out, waiting for a body to borrow. Some swore they saw Abram's heavy brow and crooked grin, grinning back in the upstairs window, just before the curtains swayed of their own accord. By midsummer, even passing wagons gave the bend wide berth. Horses snorted and rolled their eyes white if rain too near. The air around the house tasted metallic, like rain on old iron, and birds veered high overhead rather than cast their shadows across the roof. Still, the glass shone clean and bright, not like something abandoned, but like something expectant. And on certain evenings when the sun bled low and the road lay empty, you could hear the faint scrape of nails across the inside of the window frame, as if something within had forgotten how to open the latch. The last to see it, before the road was overgrown and the path forgotten, was a wandering peddler who swore the windows no longer waited. "They're awake now," he muttered, eyes wild, pressing a tarnished coin into the barkeep's hand. "All of them, blinkin', breathin', watchin' the way we watch stars. I seen my own face smilin' back at me, only I weren't smilin'." That night, the peddler slept in the stable loft, and at dawn his pack lay neatly folded on the floor, his boots side by side, his body gone. Only the scent of wet glass hung in the hay, cold and sour. And if you stood far off on the crest of the hill that morning, you'd swear you saw a new shadow behind the upstairs pane, standing perfectly still, just waiting for someone to knock. Back. The glass did not hunger. It remembered. And in its memory it kept count. The door did not wait for footsteps. It breathed with its own slow will, as if the wood remembered who had touched it. Even bolted, the front door swung ajar when the moon was thin. The villagers swore they heard it yawning open on nights when clouds veiled the sky, as though the house itself sought company no living man could give. It opened to silence, and silence waited like a trap. Those who entered at night heard it click behind them, sealing like a throat. The house on the hill had once belonged to the Briar family, though no living soul carried that name now. They said the Briars never locked their door in life, that anyone might enter, so long as they left their voice at the threshold. When the fever took them, all 5 in 1 month, no coffin was ever fetched. The priest would not cross the threshold. Men who tried to drag the bodies out said the door swung open for them easily enough, but when they turned to leave it would not open again. By dawn they stumbled out pale and shivering, claiming the bodies were gone, the beds neatly made. In the years since, travellers sometimes found the door ajar at dusk, as if waiting for them. "The wind does it," muttered the miller, refusing to look at the hill when he passed. But the villagers knew better. There was no wind on those nights, only stillness, heavy and thick, pressing close to the windows, where no curtains stirred. They said you could hear whispers if you placed your ear to the wood. Not words, not prayers, but the rasp of breathing, like something holding very still on the other side. Children dared each other to touch the iron latch, but none lingered. Old Eleanor, the blacksmith's wife, claimed the door's grain was warm as skin. She swore that one winter evening, as she passed on her way from market, she saw the latch slowly lift itself from within, as if some unseen hand welcomed her. She ran home without looking back. One night, Abram Kettler's nephew, a bold young man named Simon, swore he would lay the rumors to rest. "It's only hinges rotting," he said, "and fools frightening fools." He took an axe and a lantern and marched up the path while the villagers watched from afar, their breath misting white in the thin moonlight. The door stood half open, waiting. Simon paused at the threshold. "If there's something here," he called, voice trembling despite his grin. "Show yourself." No answer, only the creak of timbers, as if the house shifted its weight to listen. He stepped inside, boots thudding on warped boards, and the door swung shut behind him with a click, so sharp it rang up the hill. The villagers swore they saw the lantern light vanish at once, as though swallowed whole. Inside. Simon found nothing, no furniture, no dust, only the smell of wet stone and the faint trace of wood smoke that should not have lingered after 30 years. He called out again, his voice dull against the thick silence. "Hello?" It sounded like someone else speaking. Far away. From the hallway came a soft thud. Then another. Bare footsteps, padding slowly toward him. "Who's there?" he whispered, though his throat felt clamped shut. The steps stopped just beyond the edge of his lantern glow. He could feel eyes on him, though the air was empty. The latch of the front door rattled once, then stilled. He lunged for it, wrenching hard, but it did not move, not even an inch. It was not locked. It simply would not open. Behind him, the floor groaned as though someone leaned close. A voice breathed against his ear, not quite words, more like a question unspoken. "Stay." The villagers outside heard the muffled pounding, a man hammering with fists and axe against a door that did not yield. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The house fell silent. At dawn, the door hung open again. The axe lay on the porch, blade rusted as if it had waited years in the rain. Inside, no trace of Simon remained, but some swore they saw a faint imprint in the dustless floor, the shape of 2 feet turned inward, as though standing long and still by the door. After that night, no man dared touch the latch. They passed the hill quickly, heads down, yet still they felt the weight of the house watching them go. The door no longer creaked with the wind. It opened of its own accord, at hours when no one was near. Once a wandering peddler claimed he saw 5 figures standing in the hall just beyond the threshold, motionless, as though waiting for someone to step inside and join them. And sometimes, only when the moon was a thin, dying smile. The villagers swore they saw the door swing wide, wider than any door should, into blackness that was not a hallway at all. What lay beyond was not a room, not a house, not anything that belonged to this world. The next morning the priest nailed a crude cross to the lintel. It rotted away within a week, as if eaten from the inside. And on the seventh night, when clouds smothered the stars, the door opened again, not to welcome but to call. A low, patient sound echoed from within, like knuckles rapping softly an invitation. 1, 2, 3, waiting for someone to answer. The first sound was not a creak or a sigh. It was a wet, rattling gasp, like lungs filling with mud. Beneath the wallpaper, something wheezed and rasped. When rain fell, the house shuddered as though drowning. Children pressed their ears to the plaster and came away pale. The house on Hollowmere Lane was old, older than its nails, older than the maps that claimed it stood on farmland. No one built it, at least not in living memory. Yet there it was, a slanted relic of brick and timber, its corridors too narrow, its ceilings too low, its windows fogged with a perpetual film as if it lived in its own private storm. The locals called it the breather. When the clouds burst and the ditches swelled, they swore the whole structure shifted on its foundations, as if trying to stand upright after being dragged to the riverbed. Those who walked past at night heard the walls struggling for air, sucking, damp through the mortar, a sound like bellows left to rot in a cellar. "There's something in there," whispered Hal McKinnon, a shepherd boy who'd strayed too close on a dare. His hands trembled as he told it. "Not mice, not rats, it sounds and big, like someone sleeping under the floor coughing." His sister hushed him, pressing a finger to her lips, but her eyes never stopped darting to the crooked chimney. "On the hill. Don't say it loud, it'll hear you." The old men at the tavern remembered a family once, the Carrows, who had taken up residence long ago. A husband, a wife, 3 little ones. They moved in on a clear spring morning, windows thrown wide, carpets beating in the sun. By autumn they were gone, no furniture hauled out, no wagons loaded. The hearth went cold overnight. The door left, swinging on its hinges. Some said the family drowned in their beds when the river flooded. Others said they were bricked inside the walls, not by human hands but by the house itself. After all, when strangers tried to tear away the wallpaper in later years, they found fresh plaster beneath, still damp to the touch, as though it had only just sealed over. The village priest went once, carrying a sprig of ash and a lantern. He stayed inside for less than an hour. When he emerged, his hair had turned the color of salt, though he was barely 40. To every question, he gave only a single answer, his lips dry, his voice shaking. "Do not knock." The children, of course, never listened. In summer, when the heat lay thick and boredom itched like nettles, they crept to Hollowmere Lane to press their ears against the sagging plaster. What they heard made them ill. A wet scrape, a low choke, a voice, not words exactly, but the shape of words gurgling through waterlogged lungs. One boy swore he heard his own name spoken from inside the wall, syllables dragging like soaked rope. "Did you call me?" he whispered to his playmate. "No," she hissed, backing away, her face as white as chalk. But it did. When storms rolled through, no one in the village slept easy. Thunder masked the ragged inhalations of the breather, but lightning showed its outline. Not still, not steady. The house's frame swelled and sank, beams bowing inward like ribs compressing around a body. One autumn night, a travelling tinker named Osric sought shelter there, laughing at the villagers' warnings. "Walls don't cough," he jeered, shaking rain from his cloak, "and I've slept in worse." The wind swallowed their pleas as he crossed the threshold. They heard him singing in the early dark, a tune to drown the storm. By midnight the singing broke into gasps. By dawn the house was silent again. When brave souls opened the door, they found his satchel by the hearth, his boots by the bed. But the bed was empty. Damp seeped from the walls, staining the sheets, and where the wallpaper had bubbled overnight, it pulsed faintly as though breathing still. "Where'd he go?" someone whispered. "Inside," someone else muttered, voice hollow. The breather had taken another In the weeks that followed, a new sound joined the coughing, a faint metallic rattle like coins in a jar. Those who risked listening swore it was Osric's voice, now gurgling deep under the plaster, begging to be let out. Yet no door, no window, no axe could find him. The house would not open. By winter, villagers crossed themselves when passing Hollowmere Lane. Snow crusted its roof but melted on the walls, running down in long wet streaks, as though the house itself rejected cold or was warming something alive inside. Dogs howled when led too near, eyes rolling, tails tucked, refusing to step onto the lane. On the last night of February, when the moon was thin as a sickle, a farmer named Ian swore he saw hands, pale, thin, pressing out. From under the wallpaper, fingertips wriggling for air. They left no holes, no tears, only faint impressions as though the walls themselves were soft flesh. He ran home shaking, but not before hearing a single rasping whisper seep through the damp. "Open, open." When the thaw came, the coughing grew louder, almost jubilant, as if whatever lived inside had swollen fat on its winter meal. The villagers met in secret, speaking low, voices cracking with fear. "We have to burn it," someone said. "And let the smoke carry it to us," another hissed. "Then brick it up. It already is bricked up." And so they did nothing, because no one dared touch the breather. But that night, as the rain fell heavy and warm, the coughing did not stay within the walls. It rolled down Hollowmere Lane like fog, wet and choking, curling beneath doors, rattling window latches. Children woke gagging. Mothers pressed cloths to their mouths. Fathers stoked fires to drive the damp out. And in the morning, on every house in the village, faint, wet handprints bloomed on the plaster, prints too small to belong to any grown man, too many to count, each pressed deep as though some child were trying to claw its way inside. The breather was no longer alone. The first sign was not a door. It was a draught, cold and stale, breathing from nowhere. There was a chamber between the rooms, but no hallway led to it. Some heard scratching from within, as if the walls tried to thin themselves. The carpenter who built it never signed his name again. The house on Hollowmere Lane was never meant to be grand, only sound. The beams were cut from oak so old it rang like iron when struck, and the mortar was mixed thick to hold back the wet earth. Yet, when the final brick was set, the measurements did not add up. A narrow space, no wider than a coffin, remained, pressed like a bruise between the east bedroom and the nursery. "Just settle the plaster," the foreman had told young Elias Curran, the carpenter who discovered it. "Nail it shut, forget it." But Elias did not forget. The hollow of that wall kept him awake long after the house stood finished. By day it was silent. By night it ticked, not like settling wood, but like fingernails drumming slowly on the far side of the lath. "What's inside?" his brother asked, finding Elias staring at the seam of new boards one stormy dusk. "Not what?" Elias muttered, pale under the lamp. "Who?" After that night, Elias would not speak of it. His tools rusted on the workbench. He turned away every job offered to him. When asked to sign the guild register in spring, he shook his head. His mark would not touch paper again. By summer, the family who moved in, the Kellers, grew uneasy. Their youngest, May, only 4 years old, would toddle down the east hall at night and lay her ear to the plaster. "The man's sad," she told her mother. "He wants out." When scolded, she wept, insisting she'd seen his shadow through the wall. The father laughed at first, then stopped laughing when his own lamp began to sway on its hook, though no wind touched the house. At night he swore he heard breathing behind his headboard. Though the bed stood hard against that sealed wall, visitors spoke of the room in whispers. They would measure the steps from the east door to the nursery door and find 3 paces missing. No crack, no panel, no latch revealed where the space began. Yet every so often the wallpaper would bubble, as if something pressed outward from the dark within. Once, during a thunderstorm, the nursemaid found the wallpaper torn in 3 long streaks from floor to ceiling. No one heard May cry that night, but in the morning her little palms were raw and bleeding, as though she had tried to claw her way into the wall. "She's talking to it," the nursemaid whispered, trembling. "Talking to what?" the mother demanded. "The man in the room," the nursemaid said, voice breaking. "She says his name is Elias. The family sent for a priest. He walked the halls with a candle and said the prayers of cleansing, but the flame would not stay lit near that wall. "It will not leave, Toy," he muttered, pale as paper. Something made it stay. After that, the Kellers slept with every lamp burning, but the scratches grew louder, sharper, as though the wall itself thinned under unseen hands. The carpenter's name came back to them in fragments, a man who'd vanished the winter the house was built. A man who never signed another plan, who left behind a bench, a saw, and a trail of damp footprints leading to nowhere. One rain-lashed night. The father hammered boards over the seam where the wallpaper split. The hammer fell silent mid-strike, as though swallowed by the house itself. The next morning the boards were gone, nails and all, leaving only a faint stain like old water on the plaster. And then May vanished. No door opened. No window cracked. But the nursery was empty at dawn, her small shoes still by the bed, her quilt still warm. Only the wall seemed changed, breathing faintly, the wallpaper flexing inward as though it had swallowed something whole. The Kellers fled before sunset, leaving their furniture, their clothes, even May's cradle behind. The villagers who dared to enter later found the house still and silent. But if they lingered in that hallway too long, they swore they heard a child's voice humming, muffled and distant, like someone singing through layers of cloth. Years passed. No one stayed in that house. Travelers used it as shelter only in dire weather. And those who slept near that wall woke with bruises on their ribs, as though pressed by unseen arms in the night. One autumn evening, a mason curious to test the legend broke through the plaster with a crowbar. The wall gave easily, far too easily, crumbling damp under his hands. But there was no room behind it, only another wall, thinner, then another. Each layer he pried back was wet to the touch, as though freshly laid, and each bore long scratches. Running upward, he struck something hollow at last and leaned in with his lantern. A black gap yawned between the studs, too narrow for even a child to pass, yet deep enough that his light failed to reach the far side. And from the darkness within, something scraped forward, something soft and wet, dragging nails across wood. A whisper followed, rasping, eager, "Let me draw the door." The mason ran. He left his crowbar embedded in the wall. When villagers returned at dawn to retrieve it, the plaster was smooth again, whole as though never touched, but faint. Beneath the paper, they saw a single charcoal line, a door drawn by an unsteady hand waiting for someone to open it. They did not hang still. They waited. The drapes swayed without wind, breathing in and out like lungs. At night, they rippled to a rhythm, not heart, not clock, but pulse of something deeper. A visitor swore he saw a face in the folds, staring. Back. The parlor of the old Keller house had stood untouched for years, save for dust that lay as heavy as ash and a smell of damp velvet that never faded. Sunlight through the tall, narrow windows should have brightened the room, but the curtains strangled every ray. They were not cloth so much as shadow given weight, thick black damask that seemed to drink in the light, stitched with patterns. That blurred if stared at too long. No one recalled who first hung them. The villagers swore they were there before the Kellars moved in, and yet the family had ordered nothing so fine. "They came with the house," the mother once said, half in jest, but her smile had twitched as she spoke, as if she knew it was. No jest at all. Guests who lingered too long in that room complained of a pressure on their chests, a sense of being watched from inside the folds. One night a travelling notary slept in the high-backed chair by the hearth and woke screaming. He swore the curtains had gathered round him like mourning veils, and whispered, not in words but in breaths, "Sign your name, sign your name, sign your name." Children dared each other to touch the fabric. Those who did pulled their hands back pale and cold, claiming it felt damp, as if pressed to skin rather than cloth. And every dusk, when the house sank into its long shadow, the curtains began to stir, shivering as though something behind them strained to push through. "Are there windows behind those drapes?" a villager once asked the father. "There must be," he replied, "but I've never opened them." "Why not?" The father had only frowned. "Because I'm afraid of what else I might open." After May vanished into the walls, the Kellers left, but the curtains stayed. When the house fell empty, villagers passing on the road swore they saw the heavy velvet swell outward and collapse again, as though the house itself drew breath through that room, Some claimed they heard faint music, not quite a song, not quite a prayer, but the rise and fall of distant voices humming, deep and slow, like earth settling over a grave. One autumn, Elias Curran's nephew, curious about the vanished carpenter and the tales of a hidden room, dared to step inside. He found the parlor untouched, the hearth cold, the curtains whispering against each other. By lantern light, he saw something strange in their weave, a pale impression, like a face pressing forward from beneath the fabric. "Uncle," he whispered, trembling. The curtain moved, rippling not with air but with intent. The face in the folds opened its eyes, not stitched, not painted, but wet, rolling human eyes staring out through the damask. The boy dropped his lantern and fled, swearing he felt a cold fringe brush his cheek like fingers as he ran. By winter, travelers said the curtains had grown longer. Where they once brushed the floor, they now pooled in folds like spilled ink, and sometimes the fabric would twitch as though something crawled within its hem. One night, an old woman named Marit, who claimed to remember the house's first stone being laid, crept inside with a knife. She had buried 2 brothers, both workmen who'd helped build that place, and both had vanished soon after. She told herself she would cut the cursed velvet down and burn it. "Be gone," she hissed into the darkness. "You've taken enough." The knife bit into the fabric. A deep sigh poured from the curtains, not of air, but of something leaving its bed. Marit froze as the folds opened like parting lips, and for one heartbeat she swore she saw dozens of pale hands pressing out, all clawing downward, all trying to drag something or someone deeper into the cloth. The drapes fell still again, heavy and innocent. But the knife was gone from her hand. So was her shadow from the wall. When villagers found her shoes by the door the next morning, they searched the parlor. The curtains hung unchanged, save for one new ripple in the velvet, the faint outline of a woman's open mouth, screaming soundlessly. And still they breathe at night. The rhythm has changed now, no longer slow and steady like sleep, but quick, shuddering, fevered. A heartbeat not their own. Those who pass the house at midnight swear they hear faint scratching beneath the windows, like fingernails dragging the length of the wall. Sometimes they glimpse a lantern moving inside the parlor, though no one lives there. Sometimes they hear a child humming from behind the curtains, the same tune May used to sing when she thought no one listened. Last week, a hunter swore he saw the drapes part by themselves, not pulled by cord or hand, but pulled inward, as though something behind them wanted to be seen. For an instant, he saw not glass, not night, but a black corridor stretching where no street should be, lined with doorways that opened and closed without sound. In every doorway hung another pair of curtains, and behind each, a pale face pressing, waiting, weeping. When he blinked, the vision was gone. The curtains hung still again, but his own reflection did not return to the window. And now, at sunset, the parlor glows faintly red, as though lit by some hidden lamp. The curtains twitch, as if to draw themselves, not closed but open. Tonight, they are wide enough for someone to slip through, and someone will. The first message came with the first hard freeze. That night the wind scoured the fields raw, and the old Ashcombe house woke moaning in its timbers. By dawn, a pale script gleamed across the parlor window, not drawn by any hand, but etched in rhyme so sharp it could have cut the light. The symbols curled like vines but bit like teeth, a pattern foreign to every villager who saw it. No one dared breathe on the glass. The frost resisted warmth, as if it grew from within the pane rather than upon it. Old Mrs. Whitcomb whispered that the writing was a warning, but she would not say to whom or from what. When the sun rose, the window cleared, and the letters slid away like melted wax. That evening, Jonas Carrow did not come home from the fields. His boots were found upright by the frozen ditch, but the man himself had vanished, leaving only a line of dark ice where his shadow should have fallen. By the next freeze, the frost spoke again, this time spelling a name all could read, Rowan. The boy was seen the day before, pressing his face to the pane, laughing at the strange shapes and tracing them with his finger. The villagers begged his mother to keep him inside, But children wander even when walls are thick and locks are turned. They found him beneath the mill bridge, stiff and white, eyes wide as glass dot, and still the window bloomed its cold words. Sometimes they formed a single crooked letter, sometimes a spidery sentence. Always they melted by noon. Always. Someone died by dusk. "The house is choosing," murmured Father Dane, voice shaking with both fear and drink. "Choosing who?" asked a man in the tavern corner. "Not who," the priest said, staring at the floorboards as if reading frost there too. "Whose turn?" The house belonged once to the Lorimer family, though no Lorimers lived now. After the coughing sickness took them one winter, the building passed to strangers, then to silence. No one stayed longer than a season. They all left with pale faces. Swearing the windows whispered to them at night, thin crackling murmurs like ice snapping in water. "I heard it," claimed Esther Vale, the midwife. "It said my name, clear as bells." "Windows don't speak," replied her husband. "Then what breathed on the glass?" she asked Dot the next morning. The frost spelled Esther in tall, crooked letters. By nightfall she was gone, her shawl frozen stiff against the churchyard gate. Children dared each other to look at the glass at midnight, to press their ears against the pane and listen. Some came away laughing, claiming they heard nothing at all. Others came away silent, their eyes wide, as though something had whispered just for them. A peddler passing through asked why no one shattered the cursed thing. "Glass is glass," he scoffed. "A stone will do." So they handed him one, and he hurled it with all his strength. The stone struck the pane and cracked in two. The window stood unmarked. "Not glass," the peddler muttered, pale now. "Not glass at all." When the cold deepened, the frost changed. It no longer wrote names in crooked English letters, but symbols like hooks and splintered stars, loops that turned back upon themselves, patterns that made the eye ache to follow. The villagers stopped looking, but still they felt the words. Behind them, blooming and fading with each dawn dot. On the longest night, 3 figures stood in the snow before the Ashcombe house. Father Dane, old Whitcomb, and the blacksmith's son. They meant to board the window, to blind it. Their lanterns threw trembling light across the white yard as they climbed the rotting porch. Inside, the air was bitter as a tomb. The parlour stank of wet stone and iron. The frost on the window was so thick it glowed, a pale lantern of its own. They saw their reflections in it, but not as they were. The priest's reflection wore no collar, only a noose. Whitcomb's had no eyes. The boy's reflection had his mouth sewn shut with threads of ice. "Cover it," the priest whispered. His breath smoked the air but did not touch the glass dot. The boy stepped forward, shaking, raising the first board. The frost bloomed new words beneath his hands. Whitcomb's voice cracked as she read them aloud. "Too late, Dot." The boards fell from their grip. Outside the wind howled and the lanterns guttered. The window pulsed with light, and for an instant, only an instant, they saw shapes moving behind the glass. Not reflections, faces. White, glistening, pressed close, their mouths open as though singing in a sound too cold to hear. The priest fled. Whitcomb stumbled after him. The boy never came out. By morning, the frost was clear again. No words, no face, no sign anyone had ever gone inside, save for one thing. 3 shadows stood on the wall of the parlour, burned into the plaster, though no sun had shone there. Now, as winter thickens, the window blooms faster, its frost crawling even, when no cold wind blows. Last night, a shepherd passing the Ashcombe road swore he saw writing not just on the glass, but across the snow, creeping like silver roots toward the village. And tonight, though the sky is clear and stars burn bright, the frost forms again, sharper than ever. This time it does not write a name. It writes a place. Your street. It began with a single thud in the night, heavy as soil striking a coffin lid. The old Barrow house had been empty for years, though not still. Travellers passing along the ash road spoke of a pulse beneath its roof, slow and uneven, like something too large to fit inside the narrow attic, beating against the rafters. Rain never softened it, snow never muffled it. The sound was always there, patient and wrong, a heartbeat measured in dread. Children dared each other to stand on the crooked front step after dusk, swearing they could feel it through their shoes, a deep vibration that did not match their own racing pulses. Those who lingered too long returned pale and hollow-eyed, their laughter too thin, as though something had reached through the shingles and tapped them once on the crown. Wood. "Settling," muttered Tanner Holt, who had rebuilt a dozen roofs and never flinched at a groaning joist, but his voice carried no weight. He didn't go near the place either. When the wind rose, the heartbeat slowed as though the house were listening. When the fog pressed close, the sound grew louder, like an enormous heart straining to keep time with the cold. Villagers whispered that if it ever stopped, the house would finally exhale and take the whole street with it. By the third winter, moss covered the gate and crows roosted on the eaves. No one claimed the place. The parish refused to list it for sale. But one night lights flickered in the windows, not the bright gold of lanterns, but a dull reddish glow, pulsing in time with that dreadful thud. Father Dane, still trembling, from the window that spoke in frost, begged the council to seal the Barrow house entirely. "It's not just rot," he said. "There's something breathing in there, something with a rhythm." "Then why not cut it out?" asked a young mason, only half mocking. The priest's face went slack. "You think a heart can be carved from a house and not bleed?" 3 men volunteered to climb the attic stairs. Holt the roofer, Jonas Wren the bell ringer, and Ellis Pike, who claimed he didn't believe in curses. They entered by lantern light as the sun bled behind the moor. The air inside was damp and fousing, steeped in a smell like rusting chains. Each step upward slowed the world. The heartbeat grew clearer, louder, until it seemed to speak between the thuds. "Come up! Come up!" "What if it's just wind?" Pike whispered, though he gripped the lantern handle until his knuckles cracked. "Wind doesn't breathe slow like this," Wren muttered. On the landing, the wallpaper peeled like old skin. Dust shifted without footsteps. A low, cold draft slid beneath the attic door, not a rush of air, but a steady draw, as though the room inhaled. Holt pushed the door open. Inside, the attic was wrong-shaped, wider than the house itself, the corners swallowed by shadow. Cobwebs hung like curtains, swaying in no wind. And in the center of the warped floorboards, a bulge rose and fell, beating once every 5, 6, 7 seconds. The men stood frozen. The heartbeat shook the lantern glass. "Cover it," Holt whispered. "With what?" Pike asked. "With anything," Holt hissed. "Before it—" The bulge swelled, boards straining as though something beneath them turned over in its sleep. A single nail leapt free and clattered to the floor. "Don't touch it," Wren muttered. "If it stops, what if the whole place—" But Holt had already dropped to his knees, pressing his hands to the boards as if to still them. The heartbeat faltered, missed a beat, then came back twice as loud, rattling the rafters like drumskin stretched to tearing. Something dripped from the ceiling, not water, not sap. Dark, slow drops spattered Holt's sleeve and hissed against the lantern flame. The smell of iron filled the room. The attic door slammed without a hand. Downstairs, neighbors heard shouting, then nothing but that crooked thud, louder than ever, shaking dust from the chimney. When the door finally swung open, at dawn only Pike stumbled out, face as grey as ash, hair wet with something darker than sweat. He said nothing, only pointed to the roof where crows wheeled in a tight circle, screaming. Inside, there were no lanterns, no Holt, no Wren, only a patch of raw wood where the floorboards had been pried up, and beneath it, no joists, no beams. Just a single enormous vein pulsing through the house, vanishing into the walls like roots feeding on stone. By nightfall, the heartbeat spread. Villagers lying in bed swore they could hear it in their walls, slow and heavy, tolling like a bell, too deep to silence. Even houses far from Barrow throbbed with that crooked rhythm, faint but inescapable. And now on the 7th night, the pulse grows faster, echoing through the village like boots on hollow stairs. The old house shudders in time, rafters bowing inward, windows fogging with each beat as though something inside is straining to breathe free. The attic door stands ajar again. Light, not lantern light, not firelight, seeps down the stairs in dull crimson waves. With every pulse, Dust lifts from the floorboards and hangs in the air like breath. And just before midnight, the heartbeat stops. A silence heavier than... Sound swallows the barrow house. Then something knocks once, twice, 3 times from inside the walls. The night died all at once, as though something had swallowed its last ember whole. No wind. No warning. The lanterns that lined the crooked lanes of Hollowmere winked out in unison, not guttered by draught, not choked by rain, but pulled dark, as if some great invisible lung had breathed them in. The town square vanished into ink. Only the sound of boots on stone proved the villagers were still there, clutching their coats, calling to one another in voices far too thin to fill the dark. No star shone. The moon, only moments before high and swollen, had gone out like the rest. Children screamed, though none could tell whose voice was whose. And then came the shadows. They did not scatter when the light died. They grew, slender fingers reaching, from cobbles, stretching along walls, bending around corners in shapes that didn't fit their owners. A man would raise his trembling hand, and on the stones below, his shadow hand twitched a beat too late, as though waiting for a cue only. It could hear. "They're moving wrong," whispered old Tamsin, clutching the iron railing of the well. "Sweet God, they're moving wrong." Click. A single match flared in the void. Ellis Pike, still pale from the attic that beat like a heart, had struck it with shaking fingers. The sulphur light licked his hollowed face, a small defiance. Yet when he held it high, the shadow it cast wasn't his. It was taller, thinner. Its head cocked at an angle that would have broken his neck. "Put it out," hissed someone. "No," Pike rasped. "If we're blind, they'll come closer." The match burned to his fingers. He yelped and dropped it, and for one breath Hollowmere was blind again. Then a dozen more matches scratched alive, desperate flares that threw quivering halos on the cobbles, but the villagers shrank back as they saw the truth. Their shadows didn't belong to them anymore. Some crawled along the ground like insects. Others stood still while their owners turned and swayed. One shadows, a boy's, had no head at all. "Lanterns," barked Holt the roofer, voice cracking. "Light the bloody lanterns." But when they struck the first wick, the flame coiled, hissed, and went black. Another lantern, another spark. Nothing held. It was as though the night itself drank the fire, gulping greedily with every breath. Those who persisted in trying to relight their lamps found something worse. When the flame finally sputtered, it cast no shadow behind them at all. Gone, as though they themselves had stopped existing in half the world. "They're missing," someone whimpered. "Where's mine gone?" "Stop," Father Dane whispered, his voice sharp as frost. "Stop striking light, it's calling them." "Calling what?" Holt growled. But his words faltered as something passed between them, not seen but felt, like an immense body brushing against narrow walls. The air thickened, breath came shallow. Somewhere far off, a bell tolled, but not from the steeple. It tolled from below, muffled and slow as though rung through soil. Then the footsteps began, not boots, not paws, something softer, like cloth dragged along stone. With every faint shuffle, the remaining matches dimmed as though starved. "They're walking in our skins," Tamsin whispered, though no one asked how she knew. Ellis Pike swore and pulled an old storm lantern from his coat. He sparked it with a shaking hand, and for one miraculous second it caught. A brilliant white flame. The villagers gasped in relief, until they saw it. Every shadow in the square turned toward the light at once. Not the people. Just the shadows. They began to slide closer, soundless, their edges sharpening as they crossed the stones. Pike stumbled backward, raising the lantern like a shield, but its glow faltered as the nearest shadow peeled up from the ground like wet paper. It stretched thin, tall, mouthless, and reached. The flame in Pike's lantern shrieked as it went out, though no glass broke. The darkness clamped down like a hand. When dawn finally came, Hollowmere was pale and shivering. No bodies lay in the square, no blood slicked the cobbles. But 6 houses stood empty, and inside each the beds were warm, the doors locked from within and the walls marked with long, finger-like smears of soot. Most dreadful of all. When the sun struck the square, it revealed something no one dared speak aloud. The missing villagers were nowhere to be found. But their shadows still lay there, crisp and perfect in the morning light, as though patiently waiting for bodies to return. That night, no one lit a lantern, not for fear of darkness, but because the shadows, now ownerless, had begun to move, on their own. And as the moon rose over Hollowmere, they gathered together in the square, stretching long arms toward the old barrow house, where windows fogged from inside, though no one lived within. It began with a sigh that no one should have heard. The looking-glass in the master bedroom of the barrow house clouded over, soft as breath on glass, though the air was frigid, still as a tomb. The room had not been touched in 30 years. Dust lay heavy on the curtains, the furniture warped with damp, and yet the tall black-framed mirror gleamed as if it had been polished by unseen hands. Villagers whispered that the barrow house had too many windows and not enough light. Too many rooms and not enough walls. Its attic beat like a slow, crooked heart. Its wallpaper rasped and wheezed when rain fell, and now its mirror breathed. Each dusk, a faint curl of fog would bloom across its silvered face, as though someone stood impossibly close on the other side, exhaling against it. Sometimes it lingered, sometimes it vanished before morning, but always, if anyone dared wipe it away, they did not see their own reflection. They saw someone smiling. Not broadly, not with joy. A soft, patient smile, like a host waiting for a guest to sit at the table. "They say if you look long enough," murmured Tamsin to Ellis Pike as they passed the barrow gate, "it starts to move, even when you don't." "I'll not be tricked by ghost stories," Pike muttered, but his voice cracked and Tamsin noticed his eyes kept sliding toward the attic windows, where no curtains moved. And yet something watched that night. Pike went in alone. He told no one, not the priest, not Holt, not even Tamsin, who'd seen more than anyone should. The villagers only heard the door sigh open, then close again. Hours later, candlelight trembled through the warped glass of the upper hall. The master bedroom smelled of mildew and old roses. The bed sagged under its moth-eaten canopy, wallpaper peeled like scabbed flesh. But the mirror shone, black and waiting. Pike struck a match, lit a candle, and stepped close. His breath smoked faintly in the cold. And still, the glass bloomed first. A slow fog curled from within. "Who's there?" Pike whispered, voice low as if speaking to a sick room. The mist thickened. A shape coalesced, not clear, but present. Someone tall, someone standing too close on the far side of the silver. Pike raised his hand, trembling, and wiped the glass clean. A face smiled back, not his own. The features were blurred, water-soft, but the eyes were wrong, wide and black as a drowned man's, fixed on him without blinking. The lips curled in that same faint, patient smile, and behind them dimly he thought he saw another room. Not the barrow house, not anywhere he knew, a place lit by swaying lanterns, but no flames burned in them. "Let me out," the face whispered. Or maybe the words bloomed only in Pike's skull, cold as fingers pressed to bone. He stumbled back, heart rattling like loose boards in wind. The candle guttered, flared, and went out. In the dark. The mirror shone faintly by itself, a dim silver glow, as though lit from behind by moonlight that wasn't there. The breath on its surface thickened, then thinned, pulsing as though something on the far side were breathing faster now. "Let me out." The voice was louder, almost urgent, and with each syllable the glass quivered, not like a mirror but like the skin of deep water. Pike ran down the stairs, through the hall, into the night. He didn't notice that his reflection in the hallway glass lagged half a step behind. The villagers found him at dawn, shivering on the cobblestones, unable to speak. His eyes were glazed, fixed not on them but on the windows of the barrow house where the mirror stood waiting, clearer than ever. All day, its surface stayed cold and bare. But at dusk, when the fog crept back, there were handprints on the inside of the glass. Long, thin handprints pressed flat as though testing for cracks. Tamsin swore she saw them shift when no one moved. Holt spat and muttered about breaking it, but Father Dane shook his head. "You don't break a window in a drowning ship," the priest whispered. "You patch it, or you go down with it." By midnight, the fog spelled words no one wanted to read, letters curling backward as if written from the wrong side. I am almost through. And from the attic above, that crooked heartbeat began to race. The night it broke, the village knew at once. Though no one saw it happen, the barrow house had been groaning for weeks, every wall damp with a sickness no plaster could hold back. Windows that once devoured reflections now glimmered like black eyes opening at dusk. The curtains breathed as though in prayer. The attic beat its crooked heart faster, and the mirror's whispered sigh grew heavier each night. Yet no one dared set foot inside, not after Ellis Pike was found shaking, his own shadow gone. Then came the sound. It was not glass breaking as men know it, no sharp, clear ring of fracture. It was a deep, wet tearing, as if ice in a thawing. River had suddenly split from end to end. From every lane in Barrow Hollow, heads turned toward the hill where the house leaned. A single shudder rippled through the air, warm and damp, smelling faintly of breath. "They say the last pain's gone," murmured old Marrow Fen, standing in the square with her lantern unlit. "Pain," croaked Holt. "Then God help us all." The windows kept it penned. Father Dane only crossed himself, though his hand shook. "Or fed," he whispered. The barrow house exhaled. The sound was slow, rolling like the first sigh of some great sleeper stirring. The air in the square turned clammy, humid, as though the lungs of something vast had opened and drawn the night into them. No one spoke again. By dawn, 3 cottages at the edge of town stood empty, their doors yawning wide. Beds still warm, kettles still steaming. Only the windows were changed, warped, glass bent inward as if something outside had pressed its face close to see. That evening, Tamsin dared climb the hill with a lantern of her own. She walked the overgrown path, every weed slick with dew, though no rain had fallen. The windows of the house were dark, yet seemed to listen as she passed. Inside, the air felt thick, not musty, not old, but alive. She moved through the lower rooms, where the coughing wallpaper hung like dead skin. Chairs sat where no one had touched them in decades. Every mirror was gone, every looking-glass stolen by the villagers in some futile hope of starving the house of its own reflection. But one window remained whole, deep in the rear hall, shivering faintly in its frame as though waiting to be touched. A whisper rose from the walls, not quite wind, not quite voice. "Don't touch it," Tamsin muttered. To herself, "Just see it, then go." But the pane gleamed strangely in her lantern light, as though lit from behind by an unseen dawn. When she drew closer, her breath fogged not the glass, but her own eyes. And she saw, for just an instant, her reflection lean toward her faster. Then she herself moved. Something smiled back, patient and soft. The pane cracked. Not from her lantern, not from her hand, from within. A spiderweb fissure crawled across its surface, and a sound like laughing water rose in the hall. Warm air gusted out, wet against her face, and for one terrible second she smelled not rot, but lungs. A voice whispered, thin as steam. "Almost. Free!" Tamsin ran, though she swore the air dragged at her, heavy as syrup. Behind her another pane shattered, then another. The house was breathing faster now, every window coughing itself open, every door swelling with heat. Villagers later swore they heard the laugh. Not booming, not wild, delighted. A child's laugh, high and brittle, echoing through the glass like fingers tapping on a bell. By nightfall, only one pane remained unbroken. The high, narrow window above the attic gable, where that crooked heartbeat thudded like a drum. Lantern light caught on it as if from inside, pulsing in time with the house's breath. And then it cracked. The sound rolled down the hill like thunder, and every lantern in Barrow Hollow went out together. Those who lit them again found the flames trembling blue, their own shadows thinned and warped. Some swore they heard windows breathing in unison. Others claimed their reflections no longer matched the movement of their hands. High above, in the attic gable, something vast and patient pressed its face against the last shattered pane. And smiled, to be continued.